The dust kicked up around Daeho's boots as he stepped off the transport ship. He squinted against the orange light of Kepler Form 42b's twin suns and pulled his tool bag higher on his shoulder. The planet looked like every other frontier world he had worked on, rocky, dry, and far from anywhere important. "You must be our new mechanic," said a woman walking toward him. She wore the kind of clothes that scientists liked, clean and practical with too many pockets. "I'm Dr. Hyejin Park, welcome to the dig site." Daeho nodded and shook her hand. "Daeho Kim, thanks for having me. Though I have to ask, what exactly am I fixing out here? Your message just said you needed someone good with old machines." Hyejin smiled, but it was the kind of smile that said she knew something he didn't. "Follow me. You'll see." They walked past several smaller buildings and equipment sheds. Other team members waved as they passed. A big man with graying hair and military bearing gave Daeho a measuring look before nodding approval. A younger woman looked up from her communications equipment and grinned. "That's Woo-Bin Lee, our security chief," Hyejin explained, "and Sora Choi handles all our tech and communications. Good people. You'll like working with them." Daeho was about to ask more questions when they crested a small hill. Then he stopped walking and stared. In the valley below stood the biggest machine he had ever seen. It had to be 200 feet tall, maybe more. It looked like a giant robot from the old movies his grandfather used to watch, but different. Smoother, more elegant. Its metal skin was dark gray and seemed to drink in the sunlight instead of reflecting it. The machine stood perfectly still. Its head was turned slightly to the left, as if it had been looking at something in the distance when it stopped moving. One massive arm hung at its side. The other was raised, fingers spread, palm facing outward, like it was telling something to stop. "What the hell is that?" Daeho whispered. "We call it the Eternal Warden," Hyejin said. "It's been standing there for exactly 1,358 years. Never moved. Never made a sound, just waiting." They walked down into the valley. As they got closer, Daeho could see more details. The machine's surface was covered in symbols and patterns that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to shift and move when he wasn't looking straight at them. "Who built it?" he asked. "A species called the Vorthak. They died out about 14 centuries ago. This is one of the few things they left behind. Small buildings and tents clustered around the giant's feet like toys. Alien visitors had built shrines and monuments nearby. Some looked old, their stone worn smooth by wind and time. Others were newer, made from bright metals and strange materials. The locals worship it," Hyejin continued. "They think it's some kind of god. The Keltharian Empire spent 10 years trying to figure out how it works. Their best engineers called it impossible." Daeho walked up to one of the massive feet and put his hand against the metal. It felt warm, which was strange. "Metal and shade should be cool. Has anyone tried to get inside?" he asked. "Oh yes. Lots of people have tried. The access panel is right there." She pointed to what looked like a door in the machine's chest about 30 feet up. "Problem is, nothing works. No power readings. No response to any kind of input. Every test says it should be completely dead." Sora joined them, carrying a tablet full of readings and charts. "The weird thing is the electromagnetic signatures," she said. "They're always changing. Never the same pattern twice. Like something's active in there, but we can't figure out what." "What about the underground facility?" Woo-Bin asked as he walked over. "Show him what we found last month." Hyejin led them around to the back of the machine. There set into the rocky ground was a circular metal door about 20 feet across. It was covered in the same strange symbols as the Guardian. "This leads down to some kind of complex," she explained. "But it's sealed tight. The Guardian seems to be guarding it. Every time we try to force the door, all our equipment starts going crazy. Computers crash. Instruments give impossible readings. One time, 3 different species of aliens passed out at the same time." Daeho knelt down next to the sealed door and ran his fingers over the symbols. They felt warm too and seemed to vibrate slightly under his touch. "The Vorthak were supposed to be peaceful," Hyejin continued. "More like scientists and engineers than warriors. But they built this thing for a reason. Something scared them enough to create a 200-foot-tall Guardian and then disappear from history." "Any theories?" Daeho asked, standing up and brushing dust off his hands. "Plenty. None that make sense. The most popular one is that they were protecting something valuable. Technology, maybe. Or knowledge. But after 14 centuries, does it really matter?" Daeho looked up at the silent giant. Something about it bothered him, not scared him. He had worked on dangerous machines before. This was different. It was like looking at a puzzle that was missing pieces. "Mind if I take a look at the technical reports?" he asked. "Of course. Sora has everything digitized. Fair warning, though, it's a lot of reading. 14 different species have studied this thing. All came to the same conclusion, which is dead as a rock. Permanently offline, whatever made it work is gone forever." That night, Deho sat in his small quarters reading through files on his tablet, report after report from alien scientists and engineers, all very smart people judging by their credentials. All saying the same thing, but something felt wrong. He had been fixing machines since he was 12 years old. His grandfather had taught him to listen to what machines were trying to tell him. And this one wasn't telling him it was dead. It was telling him it was sleeping. He looked out his window at the Guardian standing motionless in the moonlight, waiting for something, but what? Outside, the wind picked up, making a soft howling sound as it blew around the giant's legs. For just a moment, Deho could have sworn he heard something else in that sound. Like breathing, deep and slow and patient. Like something waiting for the right moment to wake up. Deho woke up before dawn and made coffee with the cheap instant mix from his supplies. He sat outside his quarters drinking the terrible coffee and watching the Guardian in the early morning light. It looked different somehow, less like a statue and more like something just taking a very long nap. "You're up early," Sora said, walking over with her own cup. "Couldn't sleep?" "Something's been bothering me about the power systems," Deho said. "Mind if I ask you something technical?" "Sure. I love technical questions." "All these reports talk about trying to restart the Guardian with fusion reactors, antimatter cells, even some kind of star core energy tap the Keltharians built. But what if they're all wrong about what kind of power it needs?" Sora sat down next to him. "What do you mean?" "Look at those symbols on the chest panel. They're not circuit diagrams or power routing displays. They look more like equations. Physics equations." "I thought the same thing," Sora said, getting excited. "But I'm just a communications tech. I don't know enough physics to be sure. Mind if I call my old teacher? He might have some ideas." An hour later, they had set up a hologram projector in the main research tent. The image of an older Korean man appeared, looking slightly annoyed at being woken up on Earth. "Dai-ho, this better be important," said Master Engineer Junho Nam. "Do you have any idea what time it is here?" "Sorry, Master Nam, but I need your help with something strange." Daiho showed him the pictures of the Guardian symbols. Junho's expression changed from annoyed to curious to amazed as he studied the images. "Where did you get these?" "Alien machine. Been dead for over 1,000 years. Everyone says it can't be fixed." "Everyone's an idiot," Junho said bluntly. "These aren't power system diagrams. They're instructions for building a quantum vacuum energy extractor." "A what now?" Daiho asked. "Theoretical physics. The idea is that empty space isn't really empty. It's full of tiny particles popping in and out of existence. If you could tap that energy," Junho whistled low, "you'd have unlimited power. But the technology is centuries beyond what we can build." "What if someone else already built it?" Sora asked. Junho was quiet for a long moment. "Send me every technical scan you have. All of them. I'll run some calculations." While they waited for Junho's analysis, Daiho spent the morning crawling around the Guardian's feet with a scanner. The readings were strange. Not dead exactly. More like everything was running at such a low level that normal instruments couldn't detect it. "Find anything interesting?" asked a new voice. Daiho looked up to see an alien he didn't recognize. Tall, blue-skinned, with the kind of fancy uniform that screamed military officer. Behind him stood 6 guards in matching armor. "Admiral Takmor," Hee-jin said, walking over quickly. "We weren't expecting you. Dr. Park, I came to check on your progress. My government is concerned about your amateur approach to xenoarchaeology." The alien looked down at Daiho with obvious disdain. "And this is your mechanic, a human? How quaint." Daiho stood up and wiped grease off his hands. "Nice to meet you too." "I have been studying this machine for over a decade," Admiral Takmor continued. "My teams included the finest minds in the Keltharian Empire. We determined conclusively that it cannot be reactivated." "Maybe you were looking at it wrong," Daiho said. The alien's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. Well, you tried fusion power, right? And antimatter? And that star core thing? Obviously. Those are the only viable power sources for a machine of this size. But what if it doesn't use normal power? What if it runs on something completely different?" Admiral Takamore made a sound that might have been laughter. Young human, I have forgotten more about advanced technology than your entire species has ever learned. This machine requires a power source that can generate the equivalent of a small star. There is no something different that could possibly work. Heejin's tablet chimed with an incoming message. She looked at it and her face went pale. What is it? Wubin asked. Message from Master Nam. His analysis is, well, see for yourself. She projected the message for everyone to see. Junho's image appeared, but he looked shaken. Daeho, I've run the calculations 3 times. If I'm reading these symbols correctly, this machine doesn't just tap quantum vacuum energy. It does something impossible. It extracts power from the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Admiral Takamore scoffed. Ridiculous. Such technology violates the basic laws of physics. That's what I thought too, Junho continued. But the math works out, barely. There's just one problem. Operating this kind of system would require a control interface that could process quantum-level calculations in real time. No computer we know of could handle that kind of processing power. So it's still impossible, the Admiral said smugly. Not impossible, Junho said quietly. Just impossible for machines. You'd need something organic, something that could think in ways no computer can match, something that could make intuitive leaps and creative connections. Sora was staring at her instruments. Guys, you need to see this. What now? Admiral Tuckmore asked impatiently. My readings. They're going crazy. But only when Daeho gets close to certain parts of the Guardian. She showed them the display. Normal background radiation levels everywhere. Except when Daeho walked near the access panel or the sealed underground door. Then the readings spiked into patterns that looked almost like brainwaves. Sora whispered. It's responding to human brainwaves. Admiral Takamore stared at the readings, his blue face turning an even deeper shade. That's impossible. Maybe, Daeho said, walking closer to the Guardian. The instruments went wild. Or maybe your people just never had the right kind of brain to make it work. Preposterous. Caltharian intelligence is far superior to human cognition in every measurable way. But not in every unmeasurable way, Heejin said slowly. Humans are different. We think in ways that don't always make logical sense. We make connections that computers can't. We see patterns in chaos. Daeho put his hand against the access panel. For just a moment, the symbols seemed to glow slightly brighter. The Vorthak weren't building a machine that their own species could operate, he realized. They were building one for a species that didn't exist yet. One that could think the way their computers couldn't. Ridiculous speculation, Admiral Takmore snapped. But he was staring at the readings with something that looked like worry. Maybe, Daeho said. He looked up at the Guardian's head far above. But what if it's not speculation? What if this thing has been waiting 14 centuries for the right person to come along and turn it on? You cannot be serious, the Admiral said. You're talking about attempting to interface with alien technology that could kill you instantly. Yeah, Daeho said, grinning. Wouldn't be the first time? That evening, as Admiral Takmore's ship maintained orbit overhead, Daeho sat in his quarters reading everything he could find about quantum mechanics and brain-computer interfaces. Most of it was way over his head, but some ideas were starting to make sense. Outside his window, the Guardian stood waiting in the darkness. And for the first time since arriving on the planet, Daeho was starting to think it might not have to wait much longer. The argument had been going on for 2 hours. Absolutely not, Heejin said for the 10th time. I will not authorize anyone to attempt direct interface with alien technology of unknown origin and purpose. But the readings clearly show... Daeho started. The readings show anomalous electromagnetic activity. Wubin interrupted. That doesn't mean it's safe. That doesn't mean you should stick your brain into an alien computer that's been sitting here for over 1,000 years. They were gathered in the main research tent, with Admiral Takmore listening from his ship via communication link. The alien officer looked amused by the whole debate. I must agree with your colleagues, he said. The risk is far too great, even if your theory about human-compatible interfaces is correct, which I doubt. The attempt would likely result in your death. Or worse, Sora added quietly. What if it fries your brain but leaves you alive? Daeho sighed and ran his hands through his hair. Look, I understand the risks, but we're missing the big picture here. This thing has been waiting for someone like me. The Vorthak built it specifically for a species that thinks the way humans do. That's not an accident. You don't know that, Heejin said. You're making assumptions based on limited data. No, I'm making connections based on what the evidence is telling us. The quantum power system that needs creative thinking to operate. The interface that only responds to human brain patterns. The fact that it's been standing guard over something for exactly the amount of time it would take for humans to develop space travel. He stood up and started pacing. Don't you see? The timing isn't random. The Vorthak calculated when we'd arrive. They built this Guardian to wait for us. That's insane, Admiral Takmor said. You're suggesting that an ancient alien race predicted the evolution of your entire species. I'm suggesting they were really good at math. The debate continued through lunch and into the afternoon. Every argument Deho made was met with counter-arguments about safety and proper scientific procedure. Every piece of evidence he presented was dismissed as inconclusive. Finally, around sunset, Admiral Takmor's patience ran out. This discussion is pointless, he announced. I am ordering my ship to establish a defensive perimeter around this site. No one will be permitted to approach the Guardian without proper authorization from the Keltharian Science Directorate. You can't do that, Hyojin protested. This is an independent archaeological site. Dr. Park, I am trying to protect you from your own poor judgment. Clearly, the presence of this primitive human has clouded your scientific reasoning. That was the wrong thing to say. Wu Bin's face darkened. Primitive? Sora looked up from her instruments with a dangerous expression. Did he just call us primitive? I meant no offense, Admiral Takmor said quickly. But humans are a young species. You lack the experience to handle technology of this complexity. Deho felt something snap inside him. He walked over to the cooler where he kept his personal supplies and pulled out a beer. Real beer from Earth smuggled in his luggage despite regulations. Sora, he said, popping open the can. Hold my beer. Deho, no, Hyojin said. But he was already walking toward the Guardian. Son, don't do anything stupid, Wu Bin called after him. Too late for that, Deho called back. Admiral Takmor's voice crackled over the communicator. Human, I order you to stop immediately. Deho kept walking. Behind him, he could hear his teammates scrambling to follow, and Sora muttering something about humans being completely insane. The Guardian loomed larger and larger as he approached. Up close, the access panel looked like a combination lock and computer terminal designed by someone who thought in 4 dimensions. The symbols were moving now, shifting and changing as he got closer. Deho, please think about this, Hyojin pleaded. If you're wrong, you'll die. If you're right, you still might die. And if I don't try, that thing down there stays locked forever, he said, pointing at the sealed underground facility. Whatever scared the Vorthak enough to build a 200-foot Guardian is still out there. Maybe it's time someone found out what it is. He reached out and touched the access panel. Everything went white. When his vision cleared, he was standing inside the Guardian's cockpit. The space was bigger than it should have been, filled with controls that hurt to look at directly. Holographic displays showed star maps and technical readouts in languages that he somehow understood. And there was a voice in his head, not speaking in words but communicating in pure meaning. Finally, we were beginning to wonder if you would ever arrive. Who's we? Deho asked out loud the Vorthak archive. We have been waiting in this machine for 358 years, 4 months, 17 days, 6 hours, and 23 minutes for a member of your species to make contact. Why my species? Because you are the answer to a problem we could not solve. Your minds work in ways that our greatest computers cannot replicate. You see solutions where logic says none exist. You refuse to accept the impossible. Images flooded Deho's mind, the Vorthak civilization in its final days, a threat from beyond the galaxy that consumed entire star systems. Technology that bent space and time being built in desperate haste. We are not warriors. We never were. But we could see what was coming. The Void Watchers. Entities that exist in the spaces between stars, consuming everything they encounter. And you built this to fight them? We built this to wait for the species that could fight them. Your people, humans, more images, plans and calculations showing exactly when humanity would develop space travel, when they would reach this planet. When someone like Deho would be born with exactly the right combination of skills and personality. The Guardian Network requires pilots who can think creatively under pressure, who can adapt to impossible situations, who will attempt the ridiculous and somehow make it work. Guardian Network? This is one of 743 defensive installations throughout the galaxy, all waiting for human operators, all designed to interface with your unique neural patterns. Outside the Guardian, Deho could hear his teammates shouting his name. Alarms were going off on Admiral Takmor's ship as his sensors detected the massive power surge. The activation process has begun. The signal is being transmitted. The Void Watchers will know their ancient enemy has returned. How long do we have? Unknown, perhaps days, perhaps hours. The first scout is already approaching your solar system. Deho felt the Guardian systems integrating with his nervous system. Suddenly he could feel every sensor, every weapon system, every defensive protocol. The machine wasn't just responding to his thoughts, it was thinking with him. "So what you're telling me," he said as understanding dawned, "is that you built the ultimate alien fighting robot, waited over 1,000 years for a human to show up, and now there's an invasion fleet heading for Earth?" That is a crude but essentially accurate summary, yes. Deho started laughing. He couldn't help it. Of all the ridiculous situations he'd been in, this was definitely the most ridiculous. "Well," he said, feeling the Guardian's weapon systems coming online around him. "That's just perfect." Outside, the Eternal Guardian moved for the first time in over 13 centuries. Its head turned toward the stars and its raised hand slowly lowered to its side. In space above, Admiral Takamor's tactical officers were reporting impossible power readings and energy signatures that broke their instruments. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, ancient things that had been sleeping for millions of years began to stir, drawn by the signal that announced their oldest enemy had finally found champions. The waiting was over. The memories came in waves, each one hitting Deho like a physical blow. He was still connected to the Guardian's systems, but now he was also experiencing the final days of the Vorthak civilization as if he had been there. He saw their cities, beautiful crystal structures that grew like living things, reaching toward purple skies. He felt their fear as the first reports came in from the outer colonies. Entire star systems going dark, not destroyed, consumed, eaten by something that left behind empty space where matter used to exist. "We were scientists, not soldiers," the archive explained as the memories continued. "For 10,000 years we had known only peace. We studied the universe, built wonders, explored the nature of reality itself. We were not prepared for war." Deho watched through Vorthak eyes as their greatest minds worked frantically to understand the threat. The Void Watchers weren't aliens in any normal sense. They existed in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on the fundamental forces that held reality together. They had been sleeping for millions of years, the archive continued. We do not know what woke them. Perhaps the expansion of galactic civilization reached some critical threshold. Perhaps they simply became hungry again. The images shifted to show the first encounters. Vorthak exploration ships vanishing without a trace, colonies reporting strange dreams and nightmares before all communication ceased, military vessels sent to investigate finding nothing but empty space where worlds used to orbit. We tried to fight them with conventional weapons, energy beams, gravitational disruptors, quantum torpedoes. Nothing worked. They consumed our attacks along with everything else. Deho felt the desperation of an entire civilization realizing they faced extinction. The Vorthak had been masters of science and technology, but they had never needed to think like warriors. They approached every problem with logic and systematic analysis. That was our weakness, the archive admitted. We could only think in predictable patterns. The Void Watchers adapted to our logic faster than we could develop new strategies. "So you looked for a species that thought differently," Deho said, understanding beginning to dawn. "We analyzed evolutionary patterns throughout the galaxy. Most species that achieved spaceflight followed similar development paths. They emphasized either pure logic or pure emotion. But your species was unique." More images flooded his mind. Early humans learning to use tools, developing art and music alongside mathematics and engineering. Civilizations that valued both creativity and technology. Wars won through impossible strategies that succeeded because they were too crazy to predict. "You think with both sides of your brain simultaneously," the archive explained. "Logic and intuition working together. You see patterns that computers miss. You attempt solutions that mathematical analysis says cannot work, and somehow make them work anyway." "Like right now," Deho muttered. "Precisely. No Vorthak would have attempted direct interface with unknown alien technology. No Keltharian would risk their life on an untested theory. But humans look at the impossible and say, 'Hold my beer.'" Despite everything, Deho laughed. Even alien artificial intelligence had picked up on humanity's most distinctive trait. The memories shifted again, showing him the construction of the Guardian network. Massive factories building weapons that defied known physics. Control systems designed specifically for neural patterns that wouldn't evolve for another 13 centuries. We calculated the probability curves for your species' development. When you would achieve space travel, when individuals with the correct psychological profiles would be born, when you would find our first guardian, and if you were wrong, if we'd never made it this far, then the galaxy would have fallen to the Void Watchers long ago. This was our only chance, and yours. Deho could feel the Guardian systems fully integrating with his mind now, weapon controls that responded to his thoughts, sensors that showed him the electromagnetic spectrum in ways human eyes were never meant to see, and something else, a connection to other points of light scattered across the galaxy. The other Guardians, he breathed. 743 defensive installations, all designed for human operators. Most are still dormant, waiting for your people to find them. But suddenly Deho could sense other minds touching the network. Faint and distant, but definitely human. A woman on a colony world 300 light-years away, standing in front of a Guardian that had just activated. A man on Mars, his hands pressed against ancient Vorthak controls buried beneath the polar ice cap. The activation signal is spreading. Your species is awakening to its destiny. Outside the Guardian, alarms were blaring. Deho could hear his teammates shouting, trying to understand what was happening. Admiral Takamor's ship was transmitting frantic reports back to the Keltharian fleet. But there was something else. A distortion in space that made his new senses scream warnings. Something was coming. The first Void Watcher scout, the archive confirmed. They felt the activation signal. They know we have returned. How long until it gets here? Minutes, perhaps less. It has been traveling through folded space since the moment we activated. Deho felt the Guardian's weapon systems charging. Energy patterns that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Ammunition that wasn't made of matter but of concentrated concepts. Hope, defiance, the refusal to give up in the face of impossible odds. The Void Watchers feed on despair and entropy. They consume the order that holds reality together, but they cannot digest the kind of chaos that drives human creativity. Your unpredictability is poison to them. So we fight crazy with crazy. You fight the ultimate predator with the one thing it cannot understand. The absolute refusal to be logical when logic says you should surrender. Space above the planet began to twist and distort. Stars disappeared and reappeared in wrong positions. The fabric of reality was being stretched by something that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Admiral Takamor's ship was transmitting emergency signals, its crew reporting instrument failures and impossible sensor readings. Several of his officers had already passed out, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. The scout is testing our defenses, the archive explained. It does not yet know about the Guardian network. It expects to find only the usual resistance, conventional weapons and predictable tactics. Deho felt the other human minds in the network more clearly now. The woman on the colony world, Mi Young, her name was Mi Young, was already engaged in combat with something that her mind insisted couldn't exist. The man on Mars, Dongwu, was bringing defensive systems online that had been sleeping beneath the ice for millennia. You are connected now, the archive said. Your species fights as one. Your individual unpredictability becomes collective strength. The distortion in space suddenly collapsed, and the Void Watcher scout arrived. Deho's enhanced senses tried to process what he was seeing and failed. It wasn't really a ship or a creature. It was more like a hole in reality shaped vaguely like something alive. Light bent around it. Matter ceased to exist in its immediate vicinity. Just looking at it made his human brain want to shut down rather than accept that such a thing could exist. Do not try to understand it, the archive warned. Understanding requires logic. Logic is what it feeds on. Instead, do what humans do best, which is something completely insane that somehow works. Deho grinned and reached for the Guardian's controls. Time to show this cosmic horror what a human mechanic with a bad attitude could accomplish. The Eternal Guardian raised its weapon arm toward the impossible thing hanging in space above them, and for the first time in over 13 centuries, opened fire. The battle for Earth's solar system had begun. The Guardian's weapon didn't fire energy or matter in any conventional sense. Instead, it launched pure concepts into space, concentrated packets of human stubbornness wrapped in quantum mathematics. Each shot carried the essence of every impossible thing humans had ever accomplished. The Void Watcher scout recoiled as if struck by something physically painful. Where the conceptual ammunition hit, its reality-devouring darkness flickered and writhed. It does not understand, the archive reported with something like satisfaction. It tries to consume your defiance, but defiance becomes stronger when consumed. Through the Guardian network, Daeho could feel Mi-young on her distant colony world, piloting a sleeker Guardian ship through impossible maneuvers as she fought something that looked like a living shadow. Dongwu on Mars was coordinating planetary defense systems that fired compressed hope into the void. And all across human space, more people were waking up to strange dreams and finding themselves drawn to locations they'd never seen before. Buried Guardians were activating. Hidden installations were coming online. The network was growing. The Void Watcher scout changed tactics, trying to get closer to the planet. As it approached, reality became unstable. Admiral Takmore's ship reported that half their crew had gone insane just from looking at their sensor displays. The other half were unconscious, but the humans were still fighting. Your species is remarkable, the archive observed as Daeho dodged an attack that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. Every other race we studied would have retreated by now. Some would have surrendered. Others would have calculated that victory was impossible and chosen death with dignity. Yeah. Well, we're too stupid to know when we're beaten, Daeho said, firing another burst of weaponized stubbornness at the enemy. That is exactly why we chose you. The scout was learning, adapting its attacks to account for human unpredictability, but every time it adjusted, Daeho did something different. When it expected him to dodge left, he went straight forward. When it predicted he would retreat, he charged directly at it. Through the network, he felt Mi-young executing a fighter pilot maneuver that violated several laws of physics. Dongwu had somehow turned Mars's magnetic field into a weapon. Other humans were joining the fight. A cargo pilot who'd never been in combat was successfully operating a Guardian ship through pure instinct. A maintenance engineer had figured out how to overload defensive systems for maximum damage. The network effect is amplifying your abilities, the archive explained. Each human operator makes the others stronger. Your individual chaos becomes collective. Creativity. The Void Watcher scout was beginning to show signs of damage, if you could call it damage, when something that existed outside normal reality started to look less real. Parts of it were flickering, losing coherence, but it was also calling for help. Daeho felt the disturbance in space-time as something much larger began to approach. Not just another scout, something ancient and vast and hungry that had been sleeping since the dawn of civilization. The Void Herald, the archive whispered with something like fear. We had hoped it would remain dormant longer. Through the network, Daeho sensed the other human operators feeling the same terrible presence approaching. Mi-young's voice came through the connection, tight with stress. Whatever that thing is, it's making my Guardian shake. Defensive positions, Daeho ordered. Not entirely sure how he knew the right commands. All units focus fire on the scout. We finish this one before the big guy arrives. The coordinated attack from dozens of Guardian installations across human space converged on the scout simultaneously. Beams of concentrated human determination. Missiles filled with the absolute refusal to give up. Energy pulses that carried the essence of every underdog victory in human history. The Void Watcher scout simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, erased. The space where it had been became so thoroughly ordinary that it hurt to look at. One down, the archive noted. Approximately 40,000 to go. 40,000? Daeho asked weakly. The Void Watchers do not travel alone. They move in fleets that span entire sectors. What approaches now is merely the vanguard. The Void Herald arrived like a nightmare made manifest. It was easily the size of a small moon, but seemed to take up more space than its physical dimensions should allow. Looking at it was like staring into the space between spaces where mathematics went to die. Admiral Takmore's ship simply shut down. Every system, every mind aboard overwhelmed by the presence of something that existed in defiance of natural law. But the humans kept fighting. Impossible, the archive marveled. Every psychological profile suggested your species should have broken by now. The terror should have driven you insane. We're already insane, Daeho pointed out, lining up another shot. That's our secret weapon. The battle that followed couldn't really be described in conventional terms. It took place across multiple dimensions simultaneously, with weapons that fired concepts and shields made of pure willpower. The Void Herald attacked with entropy itself, trying to make the Guardians age millions of years in seconds. Deho countered by thinking really hard about how new cars always worked better than old ones, somehow convincing reality that the Guardian was getting younger instead of older. Mi-young trapped part of the Herald in a logic loop by insisting that if something consumed everything, it would eventually have to consume itself. Dongwu weaponized the concept of maintenance and started fixing the Herald's attacks instead of blocking them, which confused it so badly that it briefly forgot how to exist. Your species does not fight like warriors, the archive observed as the battle raged. You fight like mechanics trying to fix a broken universe. Pretty much, yeah, Deho agreed, firing a blast of concentrated, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" At the Herald's core, the attack actually worked. Part of the Herald flickered and rebooted itself into a slightly different configuration, which made it vulnerable to a coordinated strike from the entire Guardian network. When the Herald finally retreated back into the spaces between galaxies, it wasn't because it had been defeated. It was because it had become so thoroughly confused by human tactics that it needed to go somewhere quiet and think about what the hell had just happened. Victory, the archive announced with something like amazement. Actual victory against a Void Herald. We calculated the odds at approximately 14 billion to 1 against. Those aren't bad odds, Deho said. I've fixed machines with worse problems. The Guardian network settled into standby mode as the immediate threat passed. Around the galaxy, humans were climbing out of Guardian cockpits and discovering that they were now part of something much larger than themselves. On Kepler 442b, Yujin and the team were finally able to approach the Guardian safely. The cockpit opened and Deho climbed out, still wearing his grease-stained coveralls. "How do you feel?" Hyjin asked. "Like I just fought a cosmic horror with a really big robot," he said honestly. "Also like I could use a beer." "Did we win?" Sora asked. "This round, yeah. But there's a whole fleet of those things out there, and they're not going to underestimate us next time." Admiral Takamura's ship was finally responding to communications, its crew slowly recovering from their encounter with the Herald. The Admiral himself appeared on the main screen looking distinctly shaken. "Human Daiho," he said formally. "On behalf of the Keltharian Empire, I wish to apologize for my earlier comments about your species' capabilities." "No problem," Deho said. "Happens all the time. I've been instructed to ask, would humanity be willing to extend protection to our colonies? Our conventional forces are inadequate for this threat." Deho looked around at his teammates, all of whom were grinning. "I think we can work something out. Fair warning, though, we're going to do this our way." "Which is?" "Badly, but with enthusiasm." Over the following days, more Guardian installations came online as humans across the galaxy discovered their new roles. The network grew stronger with each new operator, creating a defensive web that spanned known space. The Vorthax sealed facility finally opened, revealing archives of technology and knowledge that would keep human scientists busy for centuries. But the most important discovery was a message, recorded by the Vorthak in their final days. "To the humans who find this, you are everything we hoped you would be. Illogical, unpredictable, stubborn beyond reason, and absolutely impossible to defeat. The universe is safer in your hands than it ever was in ours. P.S. The beer storage facility is in sub-basement 7. We thought you might appreciate it." Deho raised his drink to the stars where the Guardian network stood ready to face whatever came next. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the Void Watchers were regrouping and planning new strategies. Let them come. Humanity was ready, and they had the galaxy's biggest robots. What could possibly go wrong?